through the course of these videos, we have been working with these array of product objects. And we started off with the array of product objects hard-coded into our product list component. And then we decided that that might not be the best practice, and so we moved the array of product objects out into a injectable service so we could learn how injectable services work. But the reality is, most likely this data is going to be coming from an external source, like an API call like we've done in the past in other assignments, or maybe from a database. So the purpose of this video then is we're going to take the data out of our hard-coded service here, and we're going to read it in from an external JSON file. So where we're getting the data in this case is, if you look in our file structure, in the API, we have been utilizing this file called products.json. And so this is where we copied our data in from originally. So I'm going to create a API call to this local JSON file. But if you're even calling to an external URL, the process is the same. So we're just going to be using a local path as opposed to a HTTP path, and I'll show you where that all exists. So that's where we're headed. We're going to, instead of having our array of products coming from our service, we're going to get that data from products.json and bring it into this getProducts method, so that way it's simulating coming from an external GET request API. All right, so let me close this out just so we have some real estate. So I have open my app module. I have open the product service. So I have my services, the product service that we created earlier, as well as my product components page. And so we are going to start here in the app module. And in order to, the very first place that we're going to start is we need to import a library that helps us make that HTTP request, and that's a library called HttpClientModule. So I'm going to import that library. That comes from at Angular common/ATTP directory. So now that I've imported that, I also need to bring it into my imports. So I'll put it here under after the forms module and above the router module, for no good reason. It's just I don't want to deal with all of messing up my paths there. And so we're going to also bring in the router module here and the comma. All right, so now that we've got that done, we are going to utilize that, and we're going to go back into our product service.ts. I don't need this anymore, so I make sure I save it. So I'm going to close it out now that I recognize I have it. All right, and so here in the product services, I'm going to import a from that HTTP client module. I'm going to utilize here in this service HTTP client. And what client's going to do, let me get it typed out first. At Angular, I need the quotes, at Angular common/HTTP. Okay, and what this library enables me to do then is I'll be able to utilize its method that will do our GET request. All right, and so in order to utilize this client, we are going to inject its service into a constructor here in product service. Well, we don't have a constructor yet, but we will. So we're going to create a constructor. And in this constructor, we're going to inject. So just like we did before, we injected our product service. Now we're injecting our HTTP client. And it's going to be a, I'm going to call it HTTP, and it's an HTTP client type that we are injecting. So open and close curly brace. So now I can use that service here. It's injected into my product service, and all that's giving me is the ability to have some code that's already written that's going to help me do that GET request for us. All right, I think what I'm going to do next is we're going to set up just a variable that's going to hold our URL to get our JSON file. And as I told you, that ours is a local JSON file, so I'll just call it product URL equals, and I'm going to give the path for that, which is API products.json. Okay. And so now that I have the URL set up, if you are doing it like in the movie database we utilized before, we put in the whole, you could put your whole GET request in there, HTTP s:/, and all your GET request URL would go right there. All right, so now that we're getting the URL, we're wanting to eliminate all of this data that's already been hard-coded in, because it's coming from our JSON file rather than here in our hard-coded objects array of objects. Okay, so I think to make this easy, I'm just going to start kind of from scratch and delete everything that's inside of this function. So now I have an open and close curly brace. Obviously the method is unhappy, the function's unhappy because it says, hey, I need some iProduct array returned, and you haven't done that yet, so we need to return one, and that's what we're going to do next. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to type the word return to make that, try to help make that curl, there we go, make that ugly squiggly line go away. And I need to return, it says, an iProduct array. So I'm going to use this in referring to this variable that I created. That was my injectable service. So this HTTP dot, and I'm going to use the get method that is available to me from that service. And I'm going to put in the URL that this dot product that we set up a little earlier. Yes, and now I've got some squiggly lines still. Isn't that frustrating? It is. So let's try to figure out what's going on and some things that we need to learn. So this error message down here is telling me that this is a type observable. In other words, this HTTP get returns, this method returns something that's called an observable, where this product, this get products, I keep using the word this, get products returns an iProduct, but get request returns an observable. Let me expand on that. But what that means, what it means by that is I have to therefore return that observable, because that's what's coming back. So I need to make this an observable. So an observable is simply, well, I still got some squiggly lines here, so let's see why. Well, I need to import it. So import observables, make sure you use the RxJS. Okay, so now I've got that squiggly line. I got more squiggly lines, I get that. So an observable is a way to request data, but observable, unlike what we've used in the past, has the ability to return multiple values over time. And so it's being used here. In our case, we're only needing one return, and that's the request that comes back from whatever we requested the API from. But it's what we have to deal with, because that's what HTTP get returns. It returns an observable, so we have to deal with it. All right, and so the last of our squiggly line here that's upset is the fact that remember, when we get a request back, it's a JSON file. It's just a long string. And so HTTP get says, I would like to package that up for you. Instead of doing maybe a JSON stringify or something along those lines, what type of data, how do you want this data packaged up? In other words, I'm going to also do iProduct array here. And so what I'm telling when you bring the data back, it's a JSON file. If you could package it up into this iProduct that we've interfaced, that we've defined earlier in the videos, that would be great. So what ends up happening then is this HTTP get request is going to get our JSON data. It's going to wrap it up in into an iProduct array for us, and so therefore that's what's going. But it's going to be returning this get products with iProducts array as a type observable. So we're going to have to deal with that on the other end. I know that's confusing, but it's something new and it's something we have to deal with. So, all right. So now on the other end, let's see what happens. So now we're getting our data, but so now we need to look over in our product component. We've got this error. Literally, this products is an error. I'm going to comment this out. That way I have wrong language. There we go. Okay, so now what's happening is, let me just type it out. So I'm going to take this product service, which is what we've got right here. So this line that got our data, but this time when it goes and gets our data from get products, now I have to acknowledge the fact that when the data comes back, it's coming back as data type observable with iProductArray in it. So I've got to deal with this observable part. So the observable, the other end of observable is what we call subscribe. And so the way that subscribe works is, subscribe is just like a newspaper. So observable is getting data, and as it gets data, whoever is subscribing to the observable gets the data. Remember that observables are a creature that ideally or by design is going to return multiple values over time. So as if you're a subscriber to the observable, then you have the potential to receive multiple values over time. But we're just subscribing to one piece of data, one newspaper. It's a one-time free trial deal. I don't know how you want to look at that. Anyway, tried to be cute there. I don't know if that worked. So we're going to subscribe to the data, and what we need to do with that data then is we need to fill our products array. We need to fill this products with what gets returned, and we're going to do that in our subscribe function. And so the way that we're going to do that is we'll simply do, I can use the same variable names, but I'm going to use different names, just products observed, just so we can see what's happening. And I'm going to create a anonymous array. And so product observed is what is being returned. So whatever comes back from get products comes back as an observable of type iProduct. That's going to go into product observed. Well, subscribe is really what the observable is all about. So now I don't have to deal with observable because those two go hand in hand. And so now the iProduct array is going to go into my prod observed variable. And so the idea there is that I can fill products with products. I have to use the word this in order to access these properties, this class's properties. So this dot products is what got returned. So whatever got returned and put into prod observed should do the trick. But if you look at your product list page, the trick isn't done yet. And the reason why the trick isn't done yet is because remember that our product list was based on filtered products. It wasn't based on products. So remember, products was what we used to fill all of the products, but we used this array called filtered products so that if we typed in the word cart or hammer, then we did the filter in order to just put into this array the products that matched what the user input, if you remember that from several videos back. And so what's happening now, we're almost there, is that this dot products is actually, we're getting the products filled, but there's nothing that's triggering updating the filtered products. So that's not a big deal. That's a big-winded speech for let's just move our filtered products up here. So filtered products is now getting filled with products. And if you go to your product list page, that should be working once you save that. All right, so let me bring this over, and it is not displaying. So let's see, apparently I've done something wrong. If I go to product list, that should be displaying the products. So if I look on, I'm gonna go to inspect, and I'm gonna go to console, and it says uncaught null injector. All right, so that means I haven't done something right there. So I've missed something. Let me look at my app module, which is where we started this procedure. And I can see something right off the bat. Looks like I forgot a very important piece. I can see that my color codings is indicating that this was imported, but you didn't use it. And apparently I forgot to import that. So let's import it, HttpClientModule, comma, and let's see if that makes a difference on my page. And so when I bring my page over, that should fix our page problem. And in fact, when I come over, we have our products. So that's working well. All right, so now we've got that part working, and I'm just going to add a small little addendum to this. Well, before I do that, if I were you, I would go into my product JSON file, because it's always good to test to make sure that you are doing what you thought you were doing. In other words, I expect to be pulling data in from the product services from the product JSON file. So I would just add another product, call it leafy, reiki, I don't know, and then maybe I'll give it a, what's another image? We'll make it a garden cart image, which has nothing to do with it, but it will be pretty obvious whether or not the data is coming in from this or not. So I would just update my data just to make sure that the page I'm looking at in fact reflects my my new data, my data coming from my JSON file. And sure enough, I mean, sure that doesn't make sense, but you get the idea. All right, so I definitely know that's coming in from my products JSON file. So the last part of this that I want to bring to your attention is going to be in our product component. So up to this point, we have been doing all of our data retrieval in the constructor. And where it's working, it's not really the right place to be doing that. And I just left it in there in our video because I thought it was an easy flow in the way we've been doing things. Here's what we should be doing. I'm just going to type it in, ng on init, and it returns a void. And so what I should be doing, what should have happened is all of this code should be in the ng on init. And let's see, I missed one of my curly braces. So let's see. I just want, oh, I see what I did. Okay, so we want this part, and I want that in ng on it. Okay, so I move all the code into the ng on init. And really what is happening is, by definition, there is a difference between these two. And what I would encourage you to do is, if you console.log in constructor, and then do the same thing for ng on init, what you're going to find is in the console log, maybe in init, just because it's easier to type. All right, so what you're going to find is in your console log, the constructor is going to run first, and then the ng on init code is going to run. And so what's happening when Angular is running your component, the first thing that gets rendered, the first thing that gets processed by Angular is the class itself. And so anytime this class is instantiated, then the constructor is going to run. After that happens, the component gets created and the ng on init is going to run. And so usually what we do is anything, and this is kind of the horse before the cart kind of scenario as well, anything that pertains to just the class should be in our constructor. But things that are heavier lifters, things that pertain to our component, are going to be in our ng on init. So generally, by good standard coding practices, anytime that we're getting external data, that's going to be in the ng on init. So this is really the way it should have been done, and not in the class itself in the constructor. But in the constructor, we definitely have to have our injectors, so that part is correct. But moving the code out into this ng on init, which runs when the component itself gets initialized, is really the place where that should happen. So that's the final piece of this project that we're working on. So now we have an application where we have now incorporated our routing, we've incorporated components, we've done all kinds of things where we've sent data from our parent to the child, from our child back up to the parent using emitters. And we've done data binding when we needed to just bind data within our parent itself, within the component itself. We've also used ngModel, which enabled us to tie our input field to our I think it was an H4 tag. So we've done a lot in quite a few number of videos, but a relatively short amount of time. So welcome to Angular.